It is Sunday, the 22nd of April. I'm in front of the Unitarian Church of Montreal, just starting up a protest against Unitarian Universalist child abuse and child abuse cover-up. And I put down some chalk slogans here this morning, and it looks like they were very recently erased, which means that they actually were there for most of the day, which isn't such a bad thing. So we're just setting up some freestanding picket signs here. So yes, this is an entirely truthful statement. Unitarian Universalists, specifically the Unitarian Universalist Association in Boston, headed up by Reverend Dr. Peter Morales and the UUA Vice President, Kathleen K. Montgomery, do in fact misuse Canada's blasphemy law in UUA legal bullying that's clearly intended to cover up and deny pedophilia and rape committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers and Unitarian Universalist Sunday school teachers, etc. So my chalk slogans, which did protest against Unitarian clergy abuse, or actually child abuse, have been erased, but we're back with picket signs, and I may even put down a fresh chalk slogan or two. So anyhow, we're just going to put out the freestanding picket signs that I like to display, since I can't carry more than a couple, and there's a few things that need to be said here. So looking at things, I think I will try to put down a chalk slogan or two, but I think I will wait a little bit. And for now, we'll just circulate with a couple of picket signs. So the reason we're here in the evening is because there's an event, fundraiser, which will attract non-Unitarian members of the public, and I want non-Unitarians to be aware of what goes on in the Unitarian Universalist religious community. And on top of that, one of the incentives to be here tonight is one of the people who's involved in this fundraiser, Margot Ellis, assaulted me in January of 2014 with a body check worthy of an NHL hockey player that knocked me right off my feet onto my back. And then she proceeded to arrange for someone to call the SPVM police and try to make it as if I had assaulted someone in front of church when I'd done absolutely no such thing. So I ended up having to have a little chat with several SPVM officers to make it clear to them, well, no, actually I didn't assault anyone, and on the contrary, I was assaulted. I actually brought assault charges against Margot Ellis. I also tried to have her charged with public mischief for making a false report to the police, but unfortunately I got basically an incompetent and uncaring and possibly lazy SPVM sergeant detective who claimed that she couldn't have charges brought against Margot Ellis for assault because she couldn't prove intent, even though I had video clearly showing Margot Ellis looking me straight in the eye before she delivered this body check. And also, the fact of the matter is that for the lowest level of assault, called simple assault, or in French, voie de fait simple, it's actually not necessary to prove intent. You just have to prove that there was an actual assault. So Margot Ellis got away with assaulting me, and also, as far as I'm concerned, either herself or arranging with someone else to bring a false complaint to the SPVM, thanks to a detective that didn't want to do her job. So I think that's incentive enough to be here. And again, though, the main reason is, whether Margot Ellis was involved in this or not, just the fact that this is a event which will bring non-Unitarian members of the public to the Unitarian Church of Montreal, it's a good opportunity to, raise the issues of Unitarian clergy abuse and so on with the non-Unitarian public. So anyhow, as far as chalk slogans go, we shall see. I think I may not bother with chalk slogans. I think the picket signs are quite visible, and I will make sure that people see them. So we'll be here for a little while. The event starts at 7. It's now a little after 6:30, so I expect people to start showing up. And as we can see, there are some people showing up. And I would expect more to arrive between now and 7. And we'll just play it by ear. Some people may have shown up even before I got here, but I doubt that a whole lot did. Usually an event like this, when the beginning of the event is advertised at 7 o'clock, people usually show up not a whole lot earlier than that. So we shall see. In any case, a small handful of people have already gone in. They've seen my picket signs, and we'll just circulate back and forth here, let the cars see the picket signs, and hopefully a certain number of people coming to the Unitarian Church of Montreal tonight. So it happens to be Child Abuse Prevention Month. I believe in the United States. I think this is an initiative of someone in the United States. I think that's known as National Child Abuse Prevention Month. And so my protests in front of the Unitarian Church of Montreal this month have generally stuck to the theme of child abuse, and more specifically child sex abuse committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers and Unitarian Universalist Sunday school teachers, and also the fact that the Unitarian Universalist religious community goes to extreme and foolish lengths to try and conceal child sex abuse, even brazenly lying about it in worthless apologies to victims of clergy sexual misconduct. In June of 2014, so just under 4 years ago now, UUA moderator Jim Key stood up in front of 3,000 or 4,000 Unitarian Universalists at the annual general meeting of the Unitarian Universalist Association, and he delivered what was supposed to be, or what was billed as, a UUA board apology to victims of clergy sexual misconduct. Well, that apology, or so-called apology, was basically an exercise in denial, ignorance, and minimization of clergy sexual misconduct, and amongst other quite untruthful things that Jim Key said in that apology are the following words: There were no incidents of abuse of children or elders in my investigations. So in other words, he totally denied any knowledge of sexual abuse of children committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers. Claimed that he'd personally investigated clergy sexual misconduct, and in these investigations hadn't found any evidence of sexual abuse of children. Well, this is totally untruthful. I personally told Jim prior to his apology about some cases where Unitarian Universalist ministers were charged, tried, and convicted of the sexual abuse of children. Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell was charged, tried, and convicted of the forcible rape and also the unnatural rape of teenage Tibetan refugees who he had lured away from their families in India with promises of a better life in America. He essentially told the parents of these Tibetan refugees that if they gave their daughters into his care, he would take them back to America and ensure that they got a good education and ensure that they were properly cared for. And I believe he promised, that he'd get them U.S. citizenship and that sort of thing. Basically be the guardian of their daughters. Well, what happened is he repeatedly raped one of them over a period measured in years, starting when she was about 16, and continuing for quite a number of years. I believe she finally escaped from his clutches when she was in her early 20s. So basically she was a sex slave from the time she was 16 until she was able to escape when she was in her early 20s. She reported what had happened to some of the leading church members, I believe the board members of one of the two parishes that Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell was a minister of in Massachusetts. And there was an attempt by the Unitarian Universalist Association to have the girls sign a confidentiality agreement, if I'm properly interpreting some of the evidence, which may be interpreted as an effort by the Unitarian Universalist Association to silence these girls. And what happened, however, is that the women, I believe it was mostly women, I think there was also a male police officer who was informed, who was a relative of one of the church women, maybe not a member of the church himself. Anyway, these 4 or 5 leading church members decided that the best thing to do was to report what they were being told to the police and let the police handle it, and that's what they did. And Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell was charged and tried and convicted of rape and sentenced to, I believe, 8 years in jail, of which he spent 4 years, I believe. But what is interesting is that the women who did the right thing by reporting the alleged rapes and sexual abuse of children to the police were ostracized by their congregation. They were basically treated very badly for doing the right thing. And I believe they resigned as board members and were basically, had to leave the church as a result of the ostracism and shunning and so on that they were subjected to for reporting Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell to the police. So that's one case of sexual abuse of children by a Unitarian Universalist minister that is pretty well incontrovertibly true. However, the Unitarian Universalist Association decided in its wisdom to hire Stikeman Elliott barristers and solicitors defamation lawyer, Maître Marc-André Coulombe, to have me served with a cease and desist demand letter in June of 2012 that falsely accused me of the criminal act of blasphemous libel for blogging about the Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell case and also another case of abuse of children In this case, it was a parishioner, not a minister. This was Richard Buell, the First Parish, Norwell church, presided over by Reverend Dr. Victoria Weinstein, also known as Peace Bang. And this parishioner of First Parish, Norwell, Unitarian Universalist Church in Massachusetts, he was charged, tried, and convicted of the forcible rape of preteen children, children who were no older than 12 years old at the time that the rapes took place. And he too was sentenced to a certain number of years in jail. And he died in jail, if I understand things correctly. He, I think, had some sort of illness and passed away before his jail term was fully served. And it was these two cases that I blogged about that the Unitarian Universalist Association tried to hide. It's not really a laughing matter. I know, that's why I'm here, so the public can know about this. It's called a peaceful public protest. So this woman was sort of laughing somewhat at my picket signs, and then she said, "I don't go here." So, you know, she didn't know exactly what the protest was about. She was coming from the east and therefore didn't see these picket signs, which speak about Unitarian Universalists misusing blasphemy law to hide and even deny pedophilia and rape committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers. She just saw my picket sign that says unsafe sect, and the other one which says Unitarian Universalist perversion of justice, sucks you asterisk you. So she probably didn't know exactly how Unitarian Universalism is unsafe and exactly how Unitarian Universalists pervert justice. And in fact, there's quite a number